of UN Global Compact Network India. It is my pleasure to welcome each one of you to this special session organized by Global Compact Network India on the sidelines of UNGA. A special welcome to our chair, Gender Equality Forum, Ms. Vaishali Sinha. We also have our two speakers, CEOs from two important organizations of India, Mr. Yasmin Yardi, CEO of Capgemini, and Ms. Gagan Bhullar, founder and CEO Superhuman Race. Our speakers are from some of our inspiring companies of India who have not only signed the commitment to women empowerment, but also to target equality. The session is, as you know, is on the target gender equality in India and the way forward. And we are truly delighted to have Ms. Vaishali as the chair of the session, who is also our chair of Gender Equality Forum in India Network, beside founding chair, Renew Foundation, and CSO Renew Power. So with these words, I'm not going to take much time because I know all of you are waiting to listen to these champions. I hand over to none other than our own chair, Vaishali Sinha, proceeding to take it forward. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. Over to
Thank you,
Vaishali.
Mr. Singh. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Singh. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and so delighted that there is a conversation happening on target gender equality. As you know, I always say that the more we speak on this, the less it is. And it is really critical that this decade we meet the requirements of SDG 5. So, we're all living in unprecedented time. First of all, I want to just say that I hope everybody who's listening to this session is safe and is doing well. It's really a difficult time, and it's really been great that we've all been able to connect way more than we would have ever done through the virtual platform during these times. It's going to be the new normal. I think the important thing is, this is just to talk about the Gender Equality Summit I chair. I've chaired 3 sessions, 3 summits, and each one of them have been a step in the right direction, moving forward, pushing the ball forward, and ensuring that what we are discussing with the experts and leaders is actually implemented. So that remains a priority of each and every summit of ours, and we have tried our best to walk the talk. And so as we do that, it's important that we all work together, we collaborate, right from the international organizations to international and national governments, from state level to district level to the absolute grassroots, the civil society organizations and the communities, the private sector. We have some real leaders from the private sector as well. So all of us really have to come together to solve for this, because as I see it, the numbers which we are looking at are really, really disappointing and demoralizing and demotivating. So, and especially if you look at numbers in India and the metrics in India, they are even, more disappointing. And pardon me if you've heard these numbers or read them before, but I think the more we read them, the more we talk about them, again, the less it is, because these numbers have to be on top of our mind to be able to ensure that we start focusing on the gravity of the situation, right? So India ranks 112 out of 153 countries in WEF's 2019 Gender Gap Report. And, we are the bottom 5. It's not a pretty picture, right? India's female participation in labor workforce is a paltry 25%. Nearly half of China, and lower than even that of Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, our neighbors, right? Despite whatever we are doing on the economic front and being kind of leaders in the region, this is a number which hurts me the most, right? And to top this, there is a huge amount of pay parity. If you look at Monster's 29 salary survey, women are on an average paid about 20% less than their male counterparts, right? and only about 3.7% of CEOs, MDs, senior management in NSE listed companies are women. Women hold about 14% of all board seats, and that is after the requirement which came into being some time back. Before that, as you can imagine, it was even worse. COVID times has only exaggerated this pretty abysmal situation. A recent UN report, and let's focus because we are living in these times and we really have to accept the fact that during COVID, the situation of women, not only in India, but around the world, has been negatively impacted, right? So when you look at the kind of jobs which have been lost, whether you look at the jobs which will come back, whether it's hospitality, tourism, retail, entertainment, women are employed in these sectors. So unfortunately, it's not going to be a pretty situation for women either, post-COVID or as we speak right now. I also want to draw attention to another area, which is the informal sector. 90% of India's women who are working are engaged in the informal sector. Unpaid, irregular work. So forget parity. Here we're talking about no pay at all, right? And we really need to think about this area. If you look at the way this sector has got affected during the COVID times, it's been abysmal. If you look at global numbers also, about 70% of domestic workers who have lost their jobs have been women. If you look at a lot of the girls who've not been able to attend school, the number has been significant. I think it's a 10 million plus number. So the list of how women, girls, etc. have been impacted by this pandemic has been significant. And this is not the sort of worst part of the situation. Unfortunately, what has also happened is that there's been violence and there has been an overburdening of tasks as far as women is concerned, because families are at home and they have to take care of them. And if that's not bad enough, the few women who have a job in the medical field as doctors, etc., have to expose themselves to the pandemic, come back home and take care of the elderly and the children. So pretty abysmal as far as the situation is concerned. We need to think about this, and as responsible corporates and organizations, as we implement programs, policies, initiatives, let's keep this in the center of our thinking. So I don't want to paint a very gloomy picture, though it is gloomy. We cannot shy away from that. I also want to say that we are also seeing a lot of corporates who are really running some fantastic initiatives, some organizations which are doing a lot of good work to ensure there is gender neutrality in our environment, not only in the private sector, public sector, etc. So there is good news out there. And as I engage in my conversation here today, I hope to bring some of these positive stories out. Thank you. Okay, so do you want me to jump? I'm going to jump into the maybe Q&A without much ado. Yes. So if it's okay, what I will do is, Mr. Singh, would you like to introduce Mr. Yardi and Ms. Buller?
Yeah, so I have already introduced, and I have also said they are the CEOs of inspiring companies. They have done a commendable job when they have think of gender equality. So they don't have only thought leadership, they have also action leadership. So it is truly privileged to have them on board and also to share some of the insight, how they have been able to curate those positive stories and how they have been able to make a mark. And that is why we have chosen to bring them here. That was the purpose. And I think with that introduction, I would like to hear them out, because that is what the audience will like to benefit out of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, as they say, they need no introduction, if I could put it that way. And I would, without following the gender neutrality sort of narrative, it's a pleasure to see a fantastic ratio on the screen. It's 1:1. right? And so that is really amazing. So congratulations, Global Compact, for thinking about this. And that's one question I personally ask most of my panels, that is there a balance on a panel? And I'm delighted to see that there is. So I will go to Mr. Yardi and ask him the first question. The fourth industrial revolution is upon us. And the sector and the area you work on is right in the thick of it. The boundaries between physical and digital are getting more blurred. We are heading towards digitalization and at the cutting edge of AI, big data, etc. And the pandemic has also brought the importance of technology to center stage. So my question to you is, what implications does this have on creating more gender diverse companies? What role can these tools play in creating a more gender diverse environment? And also, are women, do you think women are ready for this at the workplace? Because if you see, there is a lot of, there are barriers when it comes to women and technology, women and STEM from a very early age. So, what are your observations on this?
So I think thanks Vaishali for that question, and thanks my co-panelists as well as all the participants who are in this session for joining this very critical topic. I've had multiple, I've been fortuitous to work in the right sector and in the right company in that sense. So if you look at ITES, so Capgemini is a very large French headquartered but global ITES company. And we are close to 220,000 employees, of which 110 are in India. So we are a very large part of Capgemini Group. Incidentally, we were also a company where my previous boss was a woman, so we have had the women CEO, one of the first ones in IT industry. In that sense, IT industry has, in some ways, I take pride being the leader in how women and gender equality has been addressed. And I'll come to some of your questions. Firstly, what's been seen across ITES industry, and it depends on company to company, but we have gender and especially women participation anywhere from 30% to close to 40-45%. Of course, we still need to do much more. The second important thing is we've also seen in the industry a lot more women CEOs. And again, both these problems, I would say, are, it depends how you look at it, half glass full or half glass empty. So there is still a lot to be done. Now, I'd share a few things. First and foremost, if I could take Capgemini's approach, and probably it can be extended everywhere, the way we have dealt with this is we have 4 streams how we are addressing this. So first part of it is how you recruit and how you create gender balance during recruitment. And some of it is to go even before that. So what we have ensured is we've gone out and worked with a lot of parts of society to launch programs where women are encouraged to be part of coding schools, or women are encouraged to actually be even in schools. As we know, it's quite an acute challenge. So we've launched some programs, and especially when we recruit, one very important thing that we ensure, which again is common for all of us, is to see how we have addressed the unconscious bias. So every time we are even asking for resumes or CVs, we ensure there is equal representation. There is equal representation in panels of interviews. So that's some of the things we drive in the recruit side of our pillar. The most important is after you recruited, and we all know, especially in the life cycle of women, there are 2 key milestones. Once when they get married, and second when they have a baby. And that's where a lot of dropouts is what we see. So we have spent a lot of time on how you develop them. One thing which we've noticed is women, due to a lot of social pressures, have had less focus on their career. It's good to see the women on this forum, but a lot of women drop out when they get married or have a child. So we launched specific interventions. We call it, first part of it is career intentionality. So we actually nudge and prompt women to build their careers. And second is when they have a child, that's where the big gap is. And that's where the other thing where we are focused is on ensuring that we have programs, even when they are at their maternity leave, they are engaged with the organization. We call it fair welcome. So they're engaged with the organization and don't create a gap, because that's usually a big challenge women see, is they take a break and then it becomes somewhat a vicious cycle. And then the third key part is to retain them. We need to have a policy environment which is very enabling. The good thing is government has put a lot of regulations on, especially late if are working, and giving them support. One of the things which I'm very proud of is we have a very modern, and I will welcome some of you to come and see it, creche on each of our facilities. So typically women are worried, and interestingly, and that's also important factor of gender, is half of the consumption of creche is by women who get their children. Half of it is also by men. So sometimes I joke about it, that by the males who get their children to my creche in office, I'm ensuring some other women works for some of my competitor, but we are happy with it.
Excellent.
To your part of the question, quickly, to COVID has created challenge, and your statistics are very much apt. The biggest impact has been on women. But I would believe the way the new normal is being defined, especially in IT and ITES, I believe it's going to be a big transformation and change for women, a bigger share of women to come into workforce. All of us are looking at how women can work from home, much more flexible hours, and a lot of that would lead to much bigger workforce participation for women. So I leave it at that, and I probably hand it over back to you, Vaishali.
Yes. No, thank you so much, Ashwin. And I think you made some very good points. I think the point on, I think for women to be effective at the workplace, we need the support of the community to enable them, the socio-economic fabric and their family and their professional network, to support them during these two milestone phases in their lives. Because unless we allow men to go back home and take care of the child, women will always have to continue taking disproportionate amount of time away. And so that is one. And the same thing goes with technology as well. In COVID time, we've seen both men and women are working from home, and they're working effectively. So as long as we give women face time at work as much as men get, unless there is some sort of parity, I think we will always get left behind, and we'll always have to play a little bit of catch up. Because once we go back to work, we're going to be like, people are going to be more aggressive to be successful, right? Because a lot of challenges are being faced by companies. But thank you so much for those wonderful comments and the work Capgemini is doing. Gagan, I'd like to come to you and talk a little bit about leadership. And I'll keep my questions short because I want to hear more from you. Leadership, we have just not seen enough women in leadership, whether it is in the management or in the boardrooms. As I had mentioned in my opening comments, if it was not for the requirement of one woman board member, we wouldn't have even seen the 14% of the seats being taken by women. We have seen, we are okay about men with average capabilities, but we are so tough on selecting a woman board member. She almost has to be superhuman to get on a board. Which is not fair, Why and what is it that you think can be done? And I also want to talk in this conversation about what's being done right, so that people who are listening can, talk more about it and do more. Over to you, Gagan.
So thank you, Vaishali. I think this is a very thought-provoking question, like you said. And when we think about women, their representation in the workforce and their rising to the ranks of leadership, whether it is in government or business or as entrepreneurs, I think that there are some very real barriers to entry for women. So one of the points that you touched upon was the fact that in senior leadership, we have less than 4% participation of women, or we have less than 4% of our senior leadership in businesses as women. When this is combined with the fact that across industries, there is a gender gap, which is on average at 80-20, but in certain industries. So here's a data point. I come from data and technology. That's my background, right? So here's a data point for you. If I am a graduate, if I have a qualification of a graduate or higher, and I'm in the mining industry in a rural location, I will make 120 rupees a day or thereabouts, right? 120 rupees a day as a woman. As a man, my male counterpart will actually make about 1,000 rupees a day. And here's where it gets really interesting. A construction laborer who's a woman who is illiterate in the same rural location will actually make about 250 rupees a day. So what's the incentive to even be a graduate, right? If I'm coming from a rural location, what's the incentive of even being a graduate? And then when we extend this further, so, in the organized sector, we have, if you look at the 25% that are in the workforce, less than 5% are in the organized sector. For the entire 100% of women in the country, about 1.25% are in the organized sector. Now, these women, when you take them to the urban locations of Delhi, they make about 120% pay compared to men, right? So the average woman in Delhi will make about 693 rupees versus 570 rupees for the average male. Despite that, the gap in terms of unpaid labor. So a man is expected to do a grocery run, which will cost him about 30 minutes a day, while a woman is supposed to take care of the children, cook the meals, which could take her an average of about 5 hours a day. That is about 20% of my day, right? So I think that the challenge is money, financial.
If I could just interrupt you a little bit, if you don't mind, we'll come to the informal sector, but I want you to talk a little bit about leadership. Women in leadership. Yeah, that would be great. If you can just throw some light on that and what's being done, right? So, thank you. Yeah.
No, thanks, Vaishali. So, so these barriers, when I talked about the data points, it was to say that, if I am valued at 120 rupees versus my male counterpart, will I ever be able to succeed at the same rate as him? Because that's the value that the organization assigns to my contribution for the same level of education as somebody else. So I think that the big barriers in terms of proceeding to leadership roles, other than obviously the social support, are the very real determinants, right? So visibility is largely reduced. There's something called the Geena Davis quotient. And I want to talk about the Geena Davis inclusion quotient also, because there is a huge role that technology plays in providing an objective picture of the data. If you look at visibility, whether it is in media, in leadership, men are represented 3 times as more than women, right? In terms of the face time that they get, the speaking time that they get, whether it is on panels, in movies. And so I think in leadership, as far as the good news stories are concerned, we've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence emerge from India as to what is possible. We've seen heads of not only banking and finance and IT companies become CEOs, but we've also seen, in fact, I used to work for the Boeing company previously, and we've had examples of women who've become heads of manufacturing businesses. But the struggle is very real. So in order to get to that level, I think the barriers that we've talked about, in order to break them, the education or the background that you bring has to be combined with societal support. Marriage cannot become the license to social censure, right? And that is what it is today. So as women get married, like Ashwin also pointed out, there is a social censure on what you're able, whether you're allowed to travel or not. So I'll also quote another example on the roundtable that was conducted a few months ago. One of the women in retail mentioned that she did not feel comfortable traveling as much as her husband, right? So these are social censures that get determined for women specifically versus also being determined for men. So I think that as far as leadership is concerned, the opportunity lies in the fact that we are moving towards a digital era, which equalizes many, many different things. But the challenges remain real because only 43% of women in India even have access to a smartphone, and only 2% are actually able to drive the confluence of financial and digital inclusion, right? So at the confluence of financial and digital inclusion would be something as basic as internet banking, which also only 2% of the women have access to, right? So all of these elements where, you know, from the point of view of financial independence or just the power of money, women are sort of being pulled behind, but by power of will. So if we look at the percentage of women that are graduating year on year, that is increasing. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that can be discussed in this regard. Yeah.
Thanks, Gagan. So I think it should we shouldn't be focused on lip service. We should not be focused on tokenism when it comes to women. I think it's high time we really talk about the capability women have, and our confidence as a society, as families, as organizations in the capability women bring to the table, and really let them operate in a way they should be operating. They don't need to be like men. And we all need to understand that we are saying that, you know, the best CEOs are the ones who possess qualities which women possess, kind of, you know, compassion, empathy, etc., etc. But when you come to the real workplace, we're using that against them, right? So let's have an open mind. Let's encourage all these toppers in high schools and graduate schools to come and do their bit. And let's support them in whatever they need to do in whichever way is possible. And so I think that's very critical. It brings me to my next question, and I'll kind of come to you, Ashwin, that I see in India, the government is very vocal about a lot of support to women. You know, whether it's in rural India, whether it's policies, whether it is funding for programs, entrepreneurship, etc. A lot of announcements are happening, and a lot of initiatives are announced. And so that seems like, you know, good news to the ears. What is your view? How can the private sector, the government, and other stakeholders work together to make this march, to set the tone as is required for us to meet our goals, 2030 goals? What do you think should be done for greater collaboration and better policy?
So I think in the recent past, there have been a lot of changes in the policies which have been very supportive. You know, so one is like having childcare facilities for above certain head count on your campuses. Also ensuring safety of women. So again, in IT, ITES, we have women who work late shifts, okay? But there are certain guidelines which ensure safety of women. Also, opening up the basic aspect where, even government is saying they could work in late night, overnight shifts. So I would believe that, or I strongly believe the government has put in a lot of components of policies in place to support women. From corporate side, there are 2 or 3 things which we really need to ensure, beyond just compliance of the policy, which most corporates do. First is there has to be very clear sponsorship in a corporate to recognize this program and drive this change. And again, I'm very happy, in Capgemini, our group CEO is the sponsor for the overall gender equality program. So that's very important. The second thing is every aspect of things which you do in a corporate, we need to ensure we have data points. And one of the things which we have put, every aspect of our process we do, so we do promotions, we do increments, any role we internally post, we ensure there is women representation and right women representation. So today, let's say if I have 36-37% women working for Capgemini, if I am doing promotions, are women equally represented? Okay. If I have a leadership position, do I have a CV of a woman, and is the interview panel at women? So there is no unconscious bias. And third thing we have to really do is, we have to go to grassroots, ensure women don't drop out at the critical juncture. So one is at the time of schools, as we've always seen, if there is a financial distress, usually the women will drop out from the home, not the male child. Likewise, as I said, when there is critical events in the career, women drops out, not the male. So we need to ensure as corporate and along with the government have support system for women to continue in their career journey. I think that's what's very important. And I believe we have made a lot of progress, but I also look at the glass half empty, which means a lot more needs to be done.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashwin. And I think the mindset changed, right? I think it's not only about resources, it's about the mindset change. And I always like to remind people that, at the end of the journey, parents often look up to women to take care of them. They should look up to even sons and, daughters and everybody too, in a more neutral manner. So let's be more fair about this whole sort of mindset which we have. I realize we're 2 minutes over. I'm going to ask a rapid fire to Gagan, if it's okay, very quickly. I'm going to give you a very short time to think about it. One male leader who has advanced the cause of women in your mind, who comes to your mind?
I think Barack Obama, without a doubt. So I think the fact that he called himself a feminist was one of the big strides that we made in the moment of feminism. Because, when the president of the largest economy of the world calls himself a feminist, it is no longer a dirty word. It's a good word to be. My husband started calling himself a feminist after he heard Barack say it. So I think that that's the type of leadership that we need. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Brilliant answer, Gagan. Thank you for that. Ashwin, your turn now. A woman who comes to your mind when you think about her advancing the cause of women?
Frankly, I think it may not be the most top of the mind which people will think, but I think Kalpana Chawla. Okay, as you all know, I think there are a lot of fields where women have been there. Okay, but to be astronaut and done that many times, it's unfortunate. What happened. She passed away the way she passed away, but it's a career which not too many women have taken. Okay, and that shows you can break the barrier of any career. There is no limit of career for women.
Right. We have to dream and sky is the limit, right? And so with that, I'd like to thank both of you for raising some very important points. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Singh, over to you to wrap up the session.
Kamalji, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So thank you so much to each one of you for bringing so much of lively conversation, and especially the way we are dealing with this challenge in India. And we could have not asked for more. In fact, the time is too short. We should have got a little more time, but we know that this was the time that we could bring some insight. So thank you to Ms. Dasali, our chair, and Gagandeep for really making it, and also Yasmin Yardi for really inspiring, because you are someone who really making it happen on the ground, and we are really privileged. So we look up to you, more and more intervention of Global Compact going forward, and we have, as a custodian of this goal, we will initiate many activities under the leadership of Ms. Dasali, and surely we will make a mark towards bridging this gap. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to UN for making all of this possible, and giving the networks an opportunity to do their bit. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe.